Hey everyone, welcome back. It is about that time. My name is Josh Toshi Howard, and we're going to be talking about the most recent Dataslate and Munitorm Field Manual that just came out and how it relates to guard in particular and what you can do in your games in order to try and stay ahead of the curve. So, we're going to be going over all the changes that we have seen specifically to the guard. Then we're going to talk about the little bit of the meta shakeups towards the very end, and then we'll get our thoughts about everything all together. So, to start off with, we're going to be looking at the Munitorm Field Manual that came out earlier today. Today is March 12th, at least here on the west coast of the United States. And I think it is just about everywhere. I don't exactly know how time zones work super well, but we got a couple of nerfs just generally across the board to some units that were overperforming, particularly in Bridgehead Strike. The Cadian Heavy Weapon Squad went up 15 points. The Catachan Heavy Weapon Squad also went up 15 points. Field Ordnance Battery went up 10 points. The Munitorm Tempestuous Command Squad went up 10 points as well. And then Tempestuous Scions went up 5 points per 5, and then 10 points per 10. So up 5 points per 5 models. And at the same time, we have the Bombast class Vox Array enhancement in Bridgehead Strike also went up 10 points. So altogether, this is almost exclusively targeting things that we're seeing a lot of play in Bridgehead Strike in particular, which was the best performing detachment in Guard throughout the time of the Codex so far. Um, I think that for the most part, this was generally pretty deserved. The fact that the Catachan Heavy Weapon Squad went up 15 is a little heavy-handed. The Catachan Heavy Weapon Squad was pretty undeniably the best or the better of the two between the Cadians and the Catachan Heavy Weapon Squad, simply because like the reroll ones to wound against monsters and vehicles didn't really matter, but the fact that it had Scout 6 made it significantly faster, and it was way more useful in matchups where the mortars weren't doing anything. If you're playing up against Chaos Knights, you would throw the Catachan mortars in the front and they would become screens, whereas the Cadian heavy weapon squads really struggled to do that. Also, the Catachan heavy weapon squads, I think they're supposed to be on 60 millimeter bases, which is significantly larger than the Cadian ones. So they would be even better screens than the Cadians. So the fact that the Catachan went up 15 is not that surprising, but the fact that the Cadians also went up 15 is very surprising to me. I think these could have been at least, they should be at least 5 points cheaper than their Catachan counterparts. The Field Ordnance Battery, I was a little bit surprised this came down to 100 in the first place. So I think 110 is probably about right for this unit, where it is decent in a couple of detachments, but not generally good. Military Tempestuous Command Squad, I had this as what I thought was the single strongest um, data sheet that we had in the entirety of the Guard Codex earlier uh, when I did my tier list not that long ago. So I'm not surprised this went up 10. I am a little bit sad about the change that we have to Tempestuous Scions, and we'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end. But I think the 10 model going up 10 points was deserved, but I don't think that needed to be true for the 5 models. So I'm a little bit sad that they're not doing something similar with Tempestuous Scions as they have done with, where's an example of like the Cadian Shock Troops, where 10 models are 65, 20 models, you get a little bit of a discount on your second 10. I think they could have done the reverse here, where the first 5 models are relatively cheap, and then the next 5 models you pay a premium for, because that's where the real problem was. This feels kind of like a kick in the pants, but we'll go ahead and talk about that in a little bit. Overall, I know most people who are playing Bridgehead are talking about their list going up anywhere from about 90 to 130 points based on what they were playing. I think my list went up 115 because I lost 45 to the Catachan Weapon Squads, another 30 from the Command Squads, another 30 from the Domestic Scions, so that is 105, and then 10 more points from the Bombast class Vox Array. And to be entirely honest, if that was all that happened to my Bridgehead Strike list, I would probably continue playing it, because what this does is it removes one of my units, right? I can play with one fewer unit of Aquilons, right? I have currently I'm playing 2 units of Aquilons in my Bridgehead Strike list, and I just take the second one out and we continue about our day, right? The second unit of Aquilons was nice, but oftentimes I was like, I didn't really feel like I needed this. If you watched the interview I did with Wesley St. Hines recently, he won an entire GT without the unit of equivalence that he put in his list because he just forgot to put them in his box. So that's pretty funny. But ultimately, all of these changes would not have been enough to remove Bridgehead Strike from the meta as it currently stands. However, let's go ahead and take a look at the next document, where we are looking at this is the balanced data slate that came out at the same time as the Munitorm Field Manual, sometime late last night for people here in the United States. And this is where we see the second set of nerfs. So we can take a look under the Astra Militarum. First one, Fire Zone Purge Detachment Rule. This is whenever a Military Tempestus model from your army makes a range attack in a turn in which it was set up on the battlefield from reserves or disembarked from a transport, add 1 to the hit roll. This used to be to the wound roll, which was a really, really big deal, especially in combination with the fact that Scions would reroll once to wound always and reroll all wounds if the target was on an objective. This is a pretty significant nerf, and the big context to think about here is let's take a look at a plasma gun, right? Strength 8 with +1 to wound wounds everything in the game on a 4 or better. And if the target is on an objective, 4 is re-rolling works out to a 75% conversion from hits to successful wounds. Whereas now we're going to be wounding all those targets on 5s, and 5s re-rolling is a little bit better than hitting on 4 or wounding on 4s. I think it's 55% of the attacks actually will wound. So it is about a 20 percentage point drop in the amount of damage that we're actually doing from just this change alone. Having access to the hit roll doesn't really change anything about the way we play our list. And because in general, most good guard players were able to get their Scion units to be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s anyway by getting the second order of the +1 ballistic skill from Take Aim. So we would have both Take Aim and first rank fire, second rank fire. This allows us to drop a few points here and there, so maybe Gaunt's Ghosts aren't as necessary because we are going to be hitting on 2s anyway when we drop. But against targets that have stealth, like, it makes us a little bit more consistent. But this is a significant damage reduction to the way that most people were playing Bridgehead already. The second change that we saw to Bridgehead Strike was the firing hot stratagem. So firstly, it changed to a 2 CP cost, and the second one doesn't really change a whole lot, but it says until the end of the phase when targeting enemy unit within 12 inches, blah blah blah, all of your hot shot weapons are +1 strength, +1 AP. Which is, I think this is a bit of an odd change overall. Firing hot stratagem is a good stratagem, don't get me wrong, but it is not the stratagem that really made Bridgehead Strike ridiculous. I think the fact that Bridgehead Strike had access to 6-inch deep strike, which you would use at least once per game, and then the pick up a unit at the end of every one of your opponent's turns is a I think they are both better targets for this because I don't know about you guys, when I'm playing Bridgehead Strike, I was almost always running around with enough CP such that whenever I decided to drop all 3 of my Scion units, I was able to just dump CP into that turn. 6-inch deep strike, grenade, firing hot, remove cover if I need it. It was a lot of access to damage all at once. But if you just remove access to that just CP bank that we were oftentimes building up, it really hurts Bridgehead Strike anyway. So the fact that the firing hot stratagem, something that we're going to be using 3 to 5 times per game, went up to 2 CP is, I think, a really, really big nerf that unfortunately removes the ability for Bridgehead Strike to play that it wants to in general. Okay. Last change that we got from the balanced data slate that affects Guard in particular is the Krieg Combat Engineer's remote mine ability. So this has changed in a couple of ways. You can select one enemy unit within 9 inches. This used to be 12 inches, so we lost 3-inch range. And visible to. This was not a requirement before. We were able to do it to things over walls. Visible to the bearer and roll 1d6. On a 3+, that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. It used to be d6, so we're losing an average of 1.5 mortal wounds when it does go off, or 2d3 mortal wounds instead if it is a vehicle or fortifications. This is an average of -1 mortal wound, and I've heard a couple of different takes. I think the biggest thing to think about with this is not as big of a nerf as I think a lot of people are expecting. It does hurt a lot of the utility of the unit, but the fact that we lost 1.5 mortal wounds against most targets, and we lost 1 mortal wound against the vehicles. Means that it's really not that big of a difference. The 9 inches invisible to doesn't really change a whole lot if you were trying to also grenade that unit, because you needed to be within 8 inches of it and visible to that target anyway. So it just means that now we get a little bit less payoff when they actually go off. But if you're trying to grenade that target anyway, then it is basically identical. We just lost a little bit of damage. This one, I think, is an overreaction where people are saying engineers are dead. Like, they are definitely undeniably they are worse than they were before, but I think they could also come down 5 points. They're on like the expensive end of what you wanted them to do now, whereas before they were, they were pretty fairly costed, I thought. So overall, these are the changes in the balance Dataslate. Let's go ahead and talk about the FAQ changes. So this one, a lot of people are freaking out. I just want to let everybody know that if you're playing tournaments, this one does not matter because this is applying only to the Combat Patrol weapons table. So if you're playing tournaments that are not Combat Patrol, this one does literally no effect on your life whatsoever. Okay, other than that, Pager 94, I didn't even notice that. Crew Command Squad, the bolt pistol, now officially a pistol, I guess. This one, yeah, makes sense. So, like, someone else that doesn't have the alchemic counter agents can have a plasma pistol. Cool. Catch and Command Squad, they added a couple of guns that I think they already had access to anyway. And then the only other change is Ogre Bodyguard, Loyal Protector. This model cannot be selected as your Warlord and cannot be given enhancements. This one is mostly just kind of funny, but there is one sad thing about this, is we can no longer attach the Ogre Bodyguard, or we can no longer use the Ogre Bodyguard with Catch and Command Squad. That can still scout because we cannot give it the, this one model now has a scout keyword on the Ogre Bodyguard, which I know some people were doing in Recon. So it's like, it was kind of funny. I'm sure there were other weird things that you could do with this as well, such as like give an ogre bodyguard the everyone in the unit can scout, and then give the character like the legacy sidearm enhancement in Siege. But overall, like, it doesn't really matter. So the FAQ hasn't really changed at all, and I want to go ahead and talk about this in a bit more of a holistic fashion at this point. So this really, really hurts Bridgehead players in particular. And we have unfortunately gotten to the spot where I think the way that Games Workshop has nerfed Signs in particular, and has nerfed Bridgehead, has unfortunately left both of them in really sad positions. The main thing is that Bridgehead was undeniably very good, arguably too good for the meta, and that leaves it leaves a very sour taste in my mouth. One of the big things that I was really hoping to see on this data slate was that Scions, maybe, I think this is legitimately, I think this is like a fair price for Scions. And the Tempestuous Command Squad, I think this is probably all pretty reasonable, especially in Bridgehead Strike. But I know a lot of complaints around the community was that Scions were silly, and they were. I agree. Scions were kind of silly. But my argument always was, I think that Scions are allowed to be silly in one detachment. The problem is that everything else in Bridgehead Strike was too good at the same time. Kazarkin, Engineers, and Indirect rerolling ones to hit is a really big increase in all of their damage output. It's really, really big. So Kazarkin and Engineers and Indirect were all punching above their weight, and I really wish that that nerf had gone through instead, where Bridgehead Strike had lost the reroll ones to hit. It could be for everything. It could be for everything but Scions, but Scions are like the way that the detachment plays, and now it doesn't really even do that. I don't really think there's a lot of point to playing Bridgehead Strike. However, I want to show you guys some other data that we have from StatCheck as well. So this is data, and you can see that I'm taking it from everything that has come out since the new year, and it includes the Guard Codex and the, what do you call it, and the Eldar Codex. Basically, we get to see just about everything that was going on. And what you can generally see, so I just want to point out here, so 171 players were playing Combined Regiment during this time, and 147% or 147 players were playing Bridgehead Strike. Over this period, Combined Regiment had or combined. Oh, combined arms is actually the what do you call it? The codex one. Not a lot of people were playing it. Only about 6 people were playing it. But the other big thing is during this time, right? Combined regiment was the index. A lot of people were still playing it during this time. Um, but I kind of want to show that if we go ahead and remove that, such that we have the guard codex available and no longer playing on the index, looks like there's still some people who are playing on the index, but most players were playing on the Bridgehead strike, and this is 67 players. But I also want to do something where we show where we only go towards the top quartile of players. And we can see that it was 67. We still have 44 players, right? The combined regiment, still fairly similar numbers. Hammer the Emperor, still fairly similar numbers. But most of these strong players were playing Bridgehead Strike. And that's a big reason why Bridgehead Strike was putting out absolutely absurd numbers over the course of this period. It's because all of the players who've been playing for a long time, all of the players who have had strong, what do you call it, strong records at tournaments already, were playing Bridgehead Strike because these are the players that one have the models already, they have the or they have like the ability to borrow them or 3D print them or get access to them relatively quickly. And also, they're good, right? Like these are undeniably some of the better guard players that we have. So it's not surprising that Bridgehead Strike is posting a much better win rate than everything else when you sort to the entire guard community according to the stat check data. Right, Bridgehead Strike 57 is a little bit outside the window, but you also have to remember that this is where all or a vast majority of the strong guard players were already playing this detachment. If as a community, it was more balanced and like your top quartile of players were playing recon and siege and hammer, and it was fairly even across the board. I would be, what I want to say. I would say this data would mean more if Bridgehead Strike was still significantly above everything else. But it's not that. It's just that the players who are playing Bridgehead Strike were one having a lot of fun with it, and two, they're better players on average. So the fact that Bridgehead Strike got triple nerfed in this way is, I think, pretty sad overall. Um, but that said, I do want to say it's not all doom and gloom. This is where we start getting a little bit happier about what's left. So, a couple of things in the Munitorm Field Manual notably did not change at all. And the ones that are most surprising, I think, to people are the Rogaldorn Commander did not change. It's still 265 points. This goes from being one of, it was already, I put it at independently good. It was one of the best the data sheets that you could just put in any detachment, and it's still very strong. Nothing about this data sheet has changed. The other one that I think a lot of people were surprised about was the regular Torox. It's still 65 points, right? This one did not change at all. This was one of the cornerstones of the Hammer, the Emperor, and Mechanized Assault. And you also saw it in Bridgehead Strike, and you can also play it in Combined, and you can also play it in Siege, right? Like, it's just playable in every detachment. So we still have two of our strongest data sheets still just running around completely untouched. The other one that I think is a little bit surprising that it didn't go up at all is Kazarkin. Kazarkin remain at 110 points for a unit of 10. This is still going to be running around, and we have a core of units that are going to be doing a lot, right? These are still very powerful. A couple other ones that are worth mentioning. The Krieg Heavy Weapon Squad did not change. This one is still 75. And the other one, the last one that I think I was rather surprised I didn't change, was the Ogren Bodyguard, still only 40 points. This was one of the things that I did my most recent officer training school video about. You pair it with a command squad, and it is very powerful. Now, at the time, some people were asking, is there a point to putting it with a Military Tempestuous command squad? And there was a decent argument for it, especially for the +1 save, but now at 20 more points for +1 save, I don't know if it's worth it anymore. But just something to think about. We have the tools to skirmish for the midboard really aggressively between Kazarkin, command squads, and Ogren bodyguards, and we have the Torox as well, so we have a great ability to play the midboard. The Rogaldorn commander is still a lot of damage, and so we still have several strong detachments. The Hammer of the Emperor detachment is still, it's still good. Combined arms never really left. It was still very, very strong. And the artillery team that some people are playing in the combined arms is still there, right? We still have a lot of very powerful tools available to us. It is a nerf overall, but this is mostly just nerfs to Bridgehead in particular. The rest of guard is still doing very fine. So I'm going to expect that in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be seeing that as soon as people stop playing Bridgehead and events start allowing the new data slate to be played, Combined Arms is going to go up in win rate. Hammer the Emperor is going to go up in win rate. Mechanized Assault is going to go up in win rate. For if for no other reason than all the top players are now playing different detachments than they were before. Um, yeah, that's it. Guard is still looking good. It's just Bridgehead that is dead. Um, yeah, okay. A couple other thoughts before we move on. Um, Other things to know about the meta at large. Dark Angels didn't get changed. Grey Knights, targets visible. I don't know if this actually changes anything for anyone, but League of Votan, their new Oathband or their new Hearthguard detachment, whatever it's called, does get Judgment tokens to start, so it suddenly goes from being really bad to maybe playable. And then of course the detachment got changed a little bit as well. Where is it? And then the big thing here, there are two major changes to Space Marines that we need to know about. So the Codex Space Marines detachment was specified that it has to be like everything in the Codex. You can't do this with Liberator Assault Group anymore. So Bloodless Angels, I think, is gone. But we'll need to see more data on that. And then you can't do the silly Lieutenant and Phobos armor with Reavers, move or like Deep Strike, shoot, and then 3d6 charge something because you get to move an extra 6 or d6. Now it just moves a flat 6 and you can't charge afterwards. But yeah, Uriel Ventress got some small nerfs. So the last thing to talk about is we did get a couple of new detachments. The Tau 1 looks kind of useless. All the Tau players I've talked to said, yeah, this might as well not exist. It's kind of funny, and it's probably fun in Crusade, but it's not good for tournament play. The new Custodes one is actually pretty powerful because you can take like one unit of Alaris or Aquilon Custodians and just turn them into like a bunch of different units. So now their ability to play scoring is way better than it was before, and it's still really annoying to kill one T6 4-up invul body with 3 wounds just because you don't know how much damage you're going to need to put into it. Um, the new Orc one is absolutely crazy. The fact that Sustained 2 is going through on all of their shooting. Not in Overwatch, though. It says in your shooting phase. The Sustained 2 is basically a +2 to hit. And they also have access to a +1 to hit enhancement and like a lethal hits enhancement. There's just a lot of firepower coming out of that. So Flash Gits, Tank Bustas, and the Walker, like the Morkanaut, Gorkanaut kind of stuff. It's all very powerful. We don't know exactly what builds are going to look like later on, but you should generally be expecting that some of the top dogs are going to be probably Ultramarines are still going to be very good. Orcs are going to be very, very strong, but as a shooting army, which is a little bit weird. Inari didn't really get changed at all. They still have the crazy after something dies in the shooting phase, you can make a normal move. So Inari is still very good. And then Custodes might be good enough with this new detachment. And then we're probably not that far behind. So we're still probably like, if we're not a top 5 faction in Combined Arms, Hammer the Emperor, and Mechanized Assault, we're definitely still a top 10 faction. So the fact that Bridgehead got knocked off the top spot doesn't mean that Guard is dead. So it really is just one detachment that we kind of lost that we got to play with. I got to have a lot of fun with it for a couple months, and hopefully some of you guys did as well. Let me know what other thoughts you guys have down in the comments. I think one of the big things that I hear competing interpretations of is how much of a change the engineers actually received. So I am definitely of the opinion that people are overreacting to the Kree Combat Engineers change. I still think that they are still pretty playable, both as 5s and as 10s. Especially if we're trying to play for the midboard, play for skirmishing strategy. They are still quite good at that. But let me know what detachment you guys are looking to play. Also, oh, I forgot about this. Legion of Excess gutted. Like, this is almost as bad as Bridgehead got hit. So, should be a lot of fun. Some of the major predators against us are removed. and we still have plenty of tools to go run after some other armies. So should be a lot of fun. I think we're going to be very good anyway. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.